Okay, welcome back. The next thing I need to do is paint this thing. And any of you that have been keeping up know that the construction's done enough that I can paint. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about how to paint. So you can paint one of these with the brush. However, it's really difficult and it's really hard to get a nice smooth finish and something that looks decent. So that would be the ultimate beginner way to do it, and if that's what you want to do, that's fine, that'll work. Just make sure you have some decent brushes. Make sure your paint is thin to a consistency that it flows smoothly and is smooth and level on your kit. But I don't paint that way, so I am going to talk a little bit today about airbrushes, because that is the best way to paint a model. There's basically two kinds of airbrushes. There are single action and double action, and I have one of each. And as you can see, if I can get this shiny business out of here, I prefer Pache. The price is good on these and they're good quality. Badger is another very popular brand that is inexpensive and works really well. There's a lot of people that swear by both these brands, and I've used Badger and I've used this. For some reason I've just kind of stuck with the Pache. The difference in the two, I will talk about the double action first, because oddly enough it's the one I use the least. You can buy them in kits like this. I don't know how much the double actions are going for right now, but they're a little bit more than the single action because they're a little bit more complicated. What you get in one of these kits, and I've seen these at places like Hobby Lobby and local hobby shops. What you get is your brush. You get a couple of bottles, well actually 3 bottles, 2 smaller and 1 large bottle, and extra tips and needles. Now there are siphon feed airbrushes, which is what these are, and there are gravity feed. Gravity feed has a cup on the top where you put your paint and you spray away. Siphon feed is this type. You can either use the small cup for smaller amounts or larger bottles if you're spraying quite a bit. And basically they fit in this little opening in the bottom of the airbrush. Put your paint in there and you spray away. Now the difference between single action and double action is this. A double action, you push down on the button to create airflow. You pull back on the button for the paint flow. And the nice thing about a double action is you get your air going and you can control how much, with a little practice, you can control how much paint comes out. So you can do fine lines, you can create a little more misty effect or whatever. It just gives you a little more control over your paint. Now the internal workings of these is a lot more complicated than the single action, which is what I'll go over in a minute. And to me they're a little bit harder to keep clean, and if you don't clean them well, then your needles will stick and you'll have problems. But it does have its uses, and I like having one. I just don't use it very much. Okay, so that is the double action. Next is the single action, and this one I bought year and a half ago, maybe year and a half. But this one is less expensive. Again, it's easily obtained through local hobby shops or craft stores, Hobby Lobby, the bigger hobby outlets, and it's basically kind of the same. you get the airbrush, which I'll pull out here in a second. You get a small siphon cup. You get a mixing bottle, and then those larger bottles from the other, the double action will also fit on here. Plus you get a tool for changing the tips, and you get a couple of extra tips. Different size tips will create a different size or different range of line size and quality. The airbrush itself looks like this, and here is the tip where your cup fits. So this one's a siphon feed as well. Put your paint in there, paint comes out here. You control the amount of paint that comes out by unscrewing or screwing back in this tip. This determines how much paint comes out of the tip. Single action means you just push down, it creates the airflow which siphons the paint out. So all you can do is control your air with this button. You have to use this to control the amount of paint you spray. So, you know, it's good to practice and figure out what size line you want, or what kind of, you know, pattern. These are pretty inexpensive, but yet they're really good quality. I've had no trouble with this one at all. The tips for these and for the double action are easily purchased at craft stores. You know, wherever you buy the brush, you'll be able to buy extra parts for it, extra seals that have to be replaced, and so on. But that's basically it. Single action, double action. Single action is the one I use the most, and to me it's plenty versatile in what I can do. I can spray very fine camouflage patterns, as you can hopefully see on here. Those little small squigglies I did with my single action. I just use a smaller tip and thin my paint accordingly. But that's the difference between the two, and the reason I'm telling you about that today is airbrush is by far the easiest way to paint a model, especially when you're painting something bigger like 1/35 scale, or like this, a 1/48 scale aircraft. It just makes it a lot easier than painting it with a brush. I could go into mixing paint and thinning paint and all that, but there's a million videos, and every single person that talks about thinning paint and what they use, they'll each have a different way of doing it. A lot of people like to use different additives for their paints. Fortunately, the paint brand I've chosen is Vallejo, and the ones I use, it's called Model Air, and I don't have to thin these or add anything to them to paint, and they work like a champ. Set my my air supply at about 15 pounds. Pour the paint directly in the cup, and I'm ready to go. No thinning, no additives, no nothing. I've never had any problems. Their paint, same way. Most of the time, some paints like Model Master acrylics, you have to thin it because it's designed to be used with a brush or an airbrush, so you need to thin it, and it takes a little bit of experimentation. And I've found that from bottle to bottle on some of the paints, the viscosity can be different from one bottle to another. So you can have two bottles of Model Master acrylic paint, and one will be pretty thick and the other one won't be quite as thick, so you have to thin them differently. So there's a lot of experimentation involved. That's why I like the Vallejo. I haven't had any trouble with that being different from bottle to bottle, and it just works really well. Now, as far as air supply goes, and I'm not talking about the horrible 80s band either, you can use compressors. There are small desktop size compressors that you can hook your airbrush to. They work great. You can use larger tank style like you'd use with some pneumatic power tools. Those work as well, but they're very noisy. And I like to do my modeling in the house, so I wanted to eliminate noise completely. And what I did is I purchased a CO2 bottle from a local welding supply. It cost me $14 for the bottle. It has a valve on top, and all I had to do to buy extra was a regulator. It has an inlet pressure and an outlet pressure. So the pressure going in to the regulator, which is supplied by the bottle, and then the CO2 bottle, and then the outlet pressure, which is the amount that will come out of your airbrush. And the bottle is pretty small. I'd pull it out. I'd take it off my table here and show you, but it wouldn't. I don't think it'd fit in the frame here. But I'll show you what the top looks like. This is what the top looks like. It's got the air supply here for the main tank, which goes into this valve, and right now it's reading probably a little under 1,000 psi. And then on this side it's controlled by this valve to give you the amount of psi you want to come out of your brush, which in my case I use 15 pounds. And the really awesome thing about this is it's perfectly quiet. The only thing you hear is just the sound of the air escaping the nozzle as you're spraying. So you can be in the house and not make a bunch of racket. And also, when using a compressor, especially the types with any kind of tank, you need a moisture trap, because condensation will build up inside of a tank, and if you have that condensation escaping through your line, it's going to splatter up your paint as you're trying to paint your model. It makes a mess of things. And you can buy moisture traps, and it's just one more thing you have to get, and it's, you know, it works, but there is a margin for error. And I have heard of people that have had, if it's a really humid day especially, they'll still get moisture coming out of their airbrush from the tank, even though they have a moisture trap. So with the CO2 tank, you get no condensation at all. You get perfectly clean CO2 coming out. It's odorless, it's non-toxic, and if you're using acrylic paints, you have absolutely no smell. So you can do this in the house and nobody is going to be smelling it, and you're not going to die from chemical asphyxiation. So that's kind of the basics of the airbrush and why I use one, and why I use the brand I use, and why I use a CO2 cylinder. So again, it's not totally necessary to paint a kit, but it's a whole lot easier. And you figure for the amount, the most expensive thing on the CO2 bottle, you know, it's $14 in my area to replace one of those. You take the empty one in, pay $14, and they give you a full one, and it's good for quite a few models, quite a few spray sessions. The most expensive part of that is the regulator, and you just reuse that from bottle to bottle. And my local store, it cost me $80, but me and my son split the cost on that because we both use it, so it's $40 a piece, and that's a lot cheaper than a compressor, and a lot quieter, and a lot less muss and fuss. So the airbrush, I can't remember how much. I think this one I paid $60-70 for, I think. I can't remember. Anyway, it wasn't that bad, and you can use them practically forever if you take care of them. And they're very easy to clean, especially the single action type, because you can take this nozzle out, soak it in water, and get it all nice and clean, or thinner if you're using solvent-based paints. So that is that. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the airbrush and so forth, because that's what I'm going to be using to paint the kit. I didn't want people to be wondering what is that. So the next video I'll come up with, I'll actually do some painting, tell you what I'm doing, how I'm doing it. Alright, so that's it for now. See you later.